Good morning to one and all present here. I am Professor Yasorsky, PC Department of Commerce, Rani Channamma University, Belagavi, and also the course director of 1 week national level faculty development program organized by our university, Rani Channamma University, in the subject Research Methodology in Commerce. I have 25 years of teaching experience and guided projects, MPhils, and PhD scholars over a decade. I'm coming second time in the research process after presenting a galaxy of academicians who have rich experience in the field of teaching and research. I feel proud about them all because they still have maintained the true spirit of learning. The topic that I have selected for my presentation in this faculty development program, specifically research methodology in commerce, is scope for future research. It's a tiny component of research report writing. So let us go to our PowerPoint presentation where the details of this topic are further explained. Topic. Let's have a look at the total process of research to identify my topic in the whole process of research. Dear participants, you already come across the whole process of research divided into 9 stages. All the stages are meant for answering to an important question which is there in the mind of a researcher. As we have already defined research as a continuous process. So when you talk about process, is nothing but number of activities are chronologically arranged. So that, just a brief look on that one. First one, we go for selection of a research problem. This is definitely the special interest of researcher in which he wishes to continue the research. Once the problem is very clear to us, second we go for review of literature. It is just to know what others have done about the same subject and what is not worked. It gives exactly the research gap which is identified by the researcher himself. He wishes to fill the gap called research gap. Once the research gap is clear, then you move to the objectives and hypothesis. This is exactly stating that what I wish to achieve out of my research and what I have an idea about the whole research objectives called hypothesis. While framing objectives and hypothesis, you should have a clear-cut idea about yourself because on this only the whole research is built up. Once the objectives are clear, then you go for constructing a research design. It is totally a total flow of research process. So the design should be correct. It should be supporting to the attainment of objectives. Once the design is clear, then you go for collection of data. This is exactly where we wish to answer 2 important questions. One, what I want and where I get it. One speaks about the sources of information. Second one, by which method I collect that information. Once the information is collected, then it goes to the process called classification and tabulation of data. Classification and tabulation data exactly makes the collected information pure information that could be used further in the research process. So after that tabulation and classification process, we move to a core aspect of our research called analysis and interpretation of the data. Out of the total information, what information we take out, we take it for research activities. So here exactly we are going to apply statistical tools, modern methods, computer-aided systems, SPSS package, and all these things are used. Real outcome of the research is the product of proper analysis and interpretation. All the information may not have a meaning, but it should be analyzed and interpreted properly. So once interpretation is clear to us, then we move to an important stage called report writing. This is exactly the summary of total work done, produced in the form of a thesis, a project, etc. Here exactly we stop for our discussion where my topic enters. The topic that I'm going to present is exactly how to write scope for further research, how to identify that there is a further scope in the same subject matter. Once the report writing is clear, a systematic presentation is clear, then just go for a physical thing called submission of thesis. So that leads to further award of doctorate or project, etc. Now, dear participants, let me go to this part called report writing, where I am addressing my subject. The subject that is there for me is scope for future research. To make the discussion more interesting, I have classified this subject into two parts. One part, how to identify future scope of research. And second important component is how to continue the tempo of research. These are two important areas where one researcher has to place himself in the flow of research. The first component is how to identify the scope. Is there any scope for my research in future? So that I'm going to discuss in the first component. Second, we shall go to how to continue this tempo of research. So first component, how to write future scope of research in the thesis. Before that, a small conceptual clarity. What exactly it means to us? How we define exactly the scope of the subject matter in future. First, it is usually said that it is last but one step in the research. Before concluding the whole process of research, every researcher wishes to write what exactly the scope is there, the next step of his research. Number two, this is exactly called a free domain of researcher, and there are no hard and fast rules as such. Dear researchers, up to this point, every researcher is under a controlled environment about his objectives, about his hypothesis, data collection, its analysis and interpretation. Everywhere is working under a controlled system. But right now, when he's writing the scope for future research, probably he becomes a free man. He can express his expressions in a free domain where he can identify future scope out of his own experiences. Third one, future scope is a future oriented. It looks ahead than the past. We don't go back here. We look further exactly what would be the future of this research subject. Fourth, he says, research gap is not equal to future scope. Research gap is exactly identified at the initial stage when you're going for review of literature. Actually, if you want to understand what is done so far, we go for identification of research gap. But what could be done in future? So that is spoken by future scope. In case of research gap, it is an expression of present status of the research done on any subject so far. But in case of future scope, we are going to speak about future status of the subject matter. Then, one more important distinction we can make here is limitations of research is not equal to future scope. Limitation of research exactly speaks non-applicability of the research and its outcomes, where I cannot apply my research. That is spoken by a limitation. But in case of future scope, we are talking about possibility of searching new areas where the same stream can be continued in future also. And one more important factor that I have to mention here is scope of the research explains what is covered within the limited area. While you're writing the thesis, and while presenting your research design, you mentioned an important area called scope of my research. That it restricts within which you are carrying your research activities. So it also means that beyond that, everything would be the scope for further research. So there I am drawing a circle here. If you draw a circle, within that circle, what it comes is exactly scope of research. But what is outside it would be definitely a scope for further research. Therefore, I have mentioned here, anything outside the perimeter of circle is scope for future research. Now, an important question. From where I can get the source to mention the future research? So what best is a source of my information to dig out and to mention what is there in the future research subject matter? Probably for this I can give a small example where I can mention how you have to search the source of future research. In an interview, in a project PhD Viva, there was a discussion between the referee and the candidate. Just I'm mentioning here to make the thing more interesting. A referee was asking a question. At the end of the Viva, the question was, are you happy about the research? Probably it is a toughest question for every research scholar. When the referee is asking, are you happy about the research? Usually candidates get confusion because answer may be either yes or no. So candidates may get confused. If he says no, then he may have a big question about what about the award of the degree. If he says yes, the degree is sure, but question is the internal voice of researcher says no, I am not happy. Therefore, it is said that probable best answer in this situation is really I am happy about my work done in relation to the topic, but I came to know that I can still do more. So when you say I can still do more, that is exactly where the scope of further research emerges. Therefore, for that, referee clapped and said, researcher may feel happy about his work done, but should not be satisfied. So the satisfaction should not be there with the work done. The next is always there in the form of future scope. So it is said that the first and foremost important source for writing future research is, number one, the feelings of the scholar about what he could not search. What he could not attain in the whole process of research is the best source for identifying the future scores in the subject matter. Therefore, it said that something is beyond his reach. So it said researcher is the right person to identify the unearthed areas. Because in the 4 or 5 years of experiences, he comes to know exactly what I didn't do. So that is definitely the best source for identifying the subject matter. Number 2, findings of the study. So when you defining your findings of the study, identifying the findings of the study, you know that what I have identified. So definitely it also answers an important question which I could not find. So that is exactly where you have to get the important source where the researcher has stopped precisely. Then he can move with the next step called identifying the future scope. Third one, geographical area. Usually, the case studies have a limited area under research. For example, if I can say that working of sugar industry in Karnataka, a case study of North Karnataka. If you mention North Karnataka, so beyond that North Karnataka is definitely there as a geographical area which is not covered. The future scholars definitely think about how to go to conduct research beyond North Karnataka. So one more important area, application of statistical tools and models. While we are conducting the research, we have our own statistical tools, practices, packages. But during the whole process, you may also feel that there are new models have been developed. new statistical tools have been developed with help of which research can be further continued. So you can definitely identify what new developments have taken place which could not be incorporated in your study. So that is the best source for the future scope. One more important aspect is limitation of time. The research are sometimes conducted for a particular period. For example, if you have covered a period of 1990 to 2009, a decade study. So after 2009, what is left out period, definitely that becomes a source of the subject matter. So it is always wide open for future study only. Then adopted methodology. When you select a topic, subject and a problem, you are definitely going to follow a method for that study. So it definitely, a changes might have taken place in the methodology of the study. So that becomes really interesting matter to suggest for the future research scholars to undertake further studies. Then one more area is sample size. Sample is a representative of total population. For example, if I have studied the investment attitudes of 100 individual investors, so after that 100 individual investors who are samples, there are so many other individuals who are left out. So there is always a scope for expanding the size of the sample, and you may reach even up to the total population study. So you can mention what is the sample size you have selected, then how far you were able to draw the conclusions. If you are feeling not happy about the sample size selected, you can even suggest, yes, the future research should be based on higher sample size. Then one more important area you can find is parallel researchers and researches. Along with you, there are so many other researchers who are carrying the research activity, the same subject matter in the different universities. You can even look them, what really they are doing and what is not done by them. That could be taken as a base for your subject matter. Now we shall answer an important area. Is there any process of stating the scope for further research? As I said earlier, mentioning future scope is a free domain of the researcher. But in order to state that subject matter, he should follow certain steps in relation to stating the scope or further research. Probably in that case, number one I have mentioned here, try to understand exactly what objectives you have set and connect them to the findings of the study. These two are very important. What were your objectives and what you found out of it. Once this is very clear to you, then you try to define what exactly limitations of study. So when limitations are clear to you, on that basis, definitely you can go for suggesting few important lines for scope for future research. But mere mentioning scope for future research and subject matters is not just sufficient. You have to even mention in the statements that role of unexplored areas. Whatever the subject area you are going to mention, that it cannot be a convincing matter to the other researchers. You should also convince them what role it would play in future. So what are its expected outcome, where I stopped and where others should continue. If you mention the role and how to carry the future research, that's really a best guide for further research and researchers also. So one more important question in front of me is that why to write scope for future research? What is the need of mentioning a subject called the scope for future research? Probably the reasons I have quoted are like this. Number one, you have done research on a particular subject matter and you wish that it should be continued by other researchers also. So the first object why you have to state further scope in the same subject matter is to see the continuation of your research theme by others, because our research is also based on the identification of research gap. When you start our research process, it is definitely the identified gap in the subject matter. So you have to suggest others to continue. You should see how others would continue the research in the subject matter. Number two, to keep ready yourself to continue the same line of research in future. Once you complete the research, it itself is not an end. Once I write the thesis, it's not an end of my research. That's exactly the real beginning for my further research also. Therefore, if you want to keep yourself active in the future research activities, you should identify the future scope in the same subject matter. You can plan to use the stock of reference material already collected during the research. When you are conducting research, definitely there are a number of data collected which is not fully used in the whole research process. So there is every chance wherein you can definitely use that data to present in the form of articles or to present in the form of books or to continue the same line of research, the same subject matter. So that is very interesting area. Third one, to accept honestly what is not covered by you in your research. This is exactly where be honest yourself. What is not covered by me? So it also indicates that what should be covered by somebody else. Because as said it earlier, it is a freedom of expression that gives the birth for identifying research topics in the future. One more objective is that to define the life of findings of your own research. Whenever we conduct research, so definitely it has got its own life. It cannot be a permanent thing probably in most of the cases. It has got time dimension. That means you have to tell how long the research outcomes would hold good. That means from that point, further research can be continued. It may be of 10 years or 20 years. If it defined precisely for how many years the outcomes will hold good, so other researchers can take further research from that point of time. One more objective is that to state clearly the theoretical hurdles experienced. This matters a lot. Every researcher while conducting the research continuously experiences so many hurdles and system problems, ambiguity in setting the objectives. Once you set the objectives after conducting the collection process, you may feel that my objective may not be suitable. You may think of modification. You may add the objective. You may delete the objective. You may change the objective. In all these cases, definitely the experience of the research scholar is useful to other researchers. Limitation of the finance. So if you want to continue the research, it requires more amount of funds, time problem, non-cooperation of the respondents. All these things matters a lot and guide further research scholars to continue the research activities. One more objective is to throw light on other dimensions of the subject from where further research can be continued. So there are different dimensions. If the same subject is taken from the viewpoint of a manufacturer, from the viewpoint of a retailer, from the viewpoint of a distributor, from the viewpoint of an agency, so dimension get changed. You can definitely define in what other dimension the research could be continued. One more is to save the time and avoid repetitive outcomes of other researchers. This is a very interesting area. Once the research is conducted, others should not do the research in the same line and waste their time. So you are supporting other research scholars to continue the same subject matter in a different angle, in different perspective, through which you are going to save the time, investment, the finance, and other difficulties experienced by you people while you are conducting the research. One more, to encourage interdisciplinary research to enhance the quality of research. Probably while you are conducting your own research, you might not have come across the cooperation of other disciplines. So if you are doing the research, you may take the help of statisticians, mathematicians, and computer experts and other subject matters which are very closely related to your subject matter. Now you've got every scope to tell that how the same subject could be carried with interdisciplinary manner with the help of other subjects, other subject experts. So that is really addition to the research already done by the scholars. Next one, to define precisely changing demographic factors which needs continued research. So once the demography is taken as a base for our research activity, so changes are quite common. The composition, age, gender changes, and the income level changes, employment changes, all these things are continuously taking changes. So these changes are to be incorporated. Therefore, you are suggesting that what changes you have to incorporate in the future research. To sum up all these things, a small example I wish to quote is that there is one topic called research topic, working of merchant banking institutions in India, a case study of selected subsidiaries of nationalized bank. So here exactly that the subject chosen is on merchant banking institutions and the subject taken is related to sample subsidies of nationalized banks. Once you complete working on this one, probably the researcher would come out what other areas may be there based on his experiences. So for your easy consideration, I have just referred to the future subjects here. Number one, study on merchant banks of private banks, because merchant banks have got wide organization categories: private banks, foreign banks, nationalist bank, and a mixture of all these things. Probably for that purpose, you are going to mention here, you can continue the study on merchant banks started by private banks, and you can study on the merchant banking institutions established by foreign banks. You can even go for a comparative study of foreign banks, private banks, and nationalist banks. And you can continue study on functional analysis of merchant banks. So they're going to undertake number of activities, fee-based activities. You can take one activity and conduct further research. And you can even conduct financial performance analysis of merchant banks. You check the balance sheets of the merchant banks. You can conduct the financial performance through different ratios, comparative balance sheets, analysis, and all other things. And problems and prospects of merchant banking in India in total. If you wish to combine all these things, you can even throw light on the problems and prospects of merchant banks in India. And you can even add public issue management by merchant banks. It's a huge area where merchant banking activities are undertaking public issue management, the core activity of merchant banks. So you can analyze the total activities performed, their performance analysis out of it. And one more area you can identify is rights issue management by merchant banks. It's again an aspect relating to public issues. And one more, if you want to get into detail, the pricing practice of public issues in India, how the pricing mechanism is done in the IPO process. So that is an interesting area for merchant banking activities. And one more is post-issue performance analysis of public issues. Merchant banks are managing the public issues. What happens to the public issues managed by merchant banks? So that is post-performance analysis. Then impact of merchant banks on the performance of parent banks. Merchant banks are established as subsidiaries. Definitely it is going to have an impact on parent banks also. So you can conduct research on impact analysis. And even you can go for project management activities of merchant banks. So what type of projects they are managed, how they are counseling, what is the fate of project counseled by merchant banks, what is the outcome of that one, how the improvement is done. So this how the whole subject matters are to be identified by the research scholars. Definitely, these are the outcomes of research scholars. What he could not add up in his total research process, he is going to make list out of that. Dear participants, my second part of discussion is definitely a continued process of the first one. In first, we try to identify the scope of future research. So now I wish to connect with the second component called, can we continue my research activity in future? If possible, what activities, what attempts I have to make as a research scholar? So the second area that I have taken to make things more interesting is how to continue the tempo of research in the same line of thought. This I have divided into two components. Sometimes we stop our research activity at a particular point of time. In other cases, we struggle very hard to continue it. So first I have identified the areas and the reasons why research stops at a particular point of time by any research scholar. The first is problems to continue research after doctorate. Is an example I have taken as a doctorate. It may be a project or it may be other research activities, probably. The first aspect which usually stops the research after award of the doctorate degree or completion of the project may be, number one, restricting ourselves to the PhD itself. The first and foremost objective that is set by scholars is that I should get PhD. Okay, once you attain it, so it becomes your own limitation. And second one, your job or profession may not expect and permit you to continue. Maybe if the research is undertaken by the people who are other than academic areas, maybe revenue department and other departments. So they conduct the research and stop there itself because their job won't permit them to continue. Third maybe reason, limitation of the time. The time may not permit you to continue. Finance may be an obstacle. Cooperation may not be there. Unfortunate events, so where you cannot continue further research. And one more reason is that bitter experiences during the research. So you might have experienced so many delay in the process, cost consumption, or your own experiences, which may stop, refrain of from doing further research. And the area chosen for the study becomes outdated, hence loss of interest. It may so happen sometimes the area which was selected for the PhD or the research may get outdated. In a sense, you don't find any scope, any interest in the same subject matter. So you wish to stop there itself. Then one more reason is dealing with institution and the guides. It may sometimes happen that after completion of the research scholars may not establish the same continued relations with institutions and even the persons who are guided. So that makes them to stop there itself. And last but not the least, probably feel exhausted in the whole process of research. You might have felt, oh my God, it's enough for me, which I cannot continue. If you are reaching to that point, definitely the research stops there itself. Now, second interesting part. In first case, definitely we are forced sometimes, or we are not willing. We feel enough for us. But second part is very important for every academician who has invested his time in the whole research process. For me, this is an important aspect. How to continue the research. So, every researcher wishes to be in the line of research for a long period because he has contributed a little bit to the research process and the subject matter, which makes him to think of how to continue research in the same line. Now, the aspect that I'm going to cover is, first is review what had happened after your research. I'm talking that every research scholar, after completion of the research with a time gap, again he should go back and think. So what is added to his subject matter? That means a review of literature after his research. So definitely that gives the ample scope for continuing the research activities. Second attempt you can make is that you can attend conferences, seminars, faculty development programs, workshops, where you can get some inputs because other academicians and experts have done further research on the same subject matter. So there you can get some clues where you can continue your research activities. And one more interesting area you can go is publish thesis in the form of books. So once a thesis is ready, usually you find that, okay, I can publish in the form of books. So when you are converting your thesis in the form of books, again you put in your different efforts because book form is totally different. It needs some changes, some additions. So that makes interesting to the readers. Fourth activity you can undertake is that referees compliments and comments. This is an important aspect for every research scholar. Refer what referees have said about your own research activity. So what are their compliments? The areas which are appreciated by them and what are the comments? If you pick the comments part of the referee's opinion, definitely you can throw light on these comments. You can catch hold of these comments and you can come out with further research activities. One more important area you can continue is get membership to academic research institutions, submit your findings to statutory bodies. Usually what we do is that after completion of research, we feel that it is enough and we don't send the outcomes to anyone. So other people will not understand. So you try to submit your findings to statutory bodies, refer to the changing environment in which your research need modification and publish articles based on the same. So others are referring that and they are waiting for your outcome. Therefore, mention your outcomes to the statutory bodies. And if possible, guide the research scholars, your own students who come for research, maybe for project, maybe for MPhil, maybe for PhD activities, and there exactly you can share your experiences and you can share the material already collected by you. So if they use that material collected during the whole process of research, so definitely that material is again used by your own scholars to continue the research activities. And important area that I find myself very good is that read your own thesis again and again. You may experience a different notion about your own thesis. You may feel that I could have done still better. So catch hold of this point. Definitely you can throw light by conducting research to bridge the gap what is not done by you in the whole process of research. This really a time work in a different way. This really you can work in a different perspective on your own thesis. You can start consultancy services based on your own experiences. If you have done work on working of merchant banking institutions, definitely you can start consultation on how to go for public issues. What are the regulations to be followed by SEBI? So what process a new entrepreneur has to follow for issue of public issues? On these things you can start consultation services because it support to update research area. If you start talking to others who are there in the practical field, so you definitely add up your knowledge and add up updated subject into your stream and guide others. And one more area, apply to the research projects of UGC, ICSSR, government agencies, and other funding agencies. If you try to apply to the research projects, you will come to know that, okay, how best I can update my own research work. So how to make my research suitable to the projects and get the funds from the agencies. And also you can go for organizing the academic seminars, workshops, symposia, which permits you to keep in contact with resource persons. When you organize academic seminar, definitely you have to invite the experts, you will have a contact with them, you speak about your own research, your own experiences. when they come to your institution, you can definitely share your experiences and enrich yourself. Then form organizations to promote and support research activities. You can establish your own small organizations through which you can have your own like-minded group through which the research activities could be promoted. And one more, subscribe to the research journals, publications in the related areas so that you will get updated information, new articles, new publications, new notions, new methodology. So that keeps you alive in the subject matter. Incorporate research outcomes in the syllabus of academic bodies. If the outcome of research is really useful to the students community, to the learners, then you can plan for how best the research outcome could be added in the form of syllabus of universities or degree colleges or at any level of studies. Then formulate quality circle of known small group. This make very interesting. You may have your own small group called friends group, which could be in the form of quality circle. Call them, discuss about the subject matter, share what is your experience, and get what other experiences are there about the subject matter. So this is the mutual growth. All the group members are getting benefit out of your research activities. Then start publishing edited books on the related subjects. So when you start publishing on the subject matter, you speak to the experts, get their articles, and you start publication of the books. This is really keeping in touch with regular research activities. So, dear participants, this is a tiny component of research thesis writing, where we are going to write something about future scope because they are referring your work to identify so what is the suggestion of the research scholar who has already spent 5 years or 10 years in the research activities. So that is going to contribute more for others. So finally, before conclusion, let me make a statement of my own experience. What motivated me to present this tiny aspect of research is the statement made by Newton. He says that what we know is a drop, what we don't know is an ocean. So when I publish my thesis, my project is a tiny component of the whole research work. So he compares his inventions, his discoveries to the drop of the ocean. So what is not covered is the ocean. Therefore, the interesting matter lies in identification of ocean where research scope is laid down. Therefore, my wish is that let's add a drop through our research each time. Thank you very much for your patient listening and cooperation. Wish you all the best.